Society teaches you to be completely transparent, endlessly forgiving, and universally liked, and society is setting you up to fail. From the day you were born, you were handed a script. Play nice, tell the whole truth, wait your turn, and good things will happen to you. But look around. The people who strictly follow that script are the ones getting passed over for promotions, drained by toxic relationships, and left behind. Meanwhile, the people actually writing the rules are playing an entirely different game. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli wrote down the mechanics of that hidden game. History painted him as a villain, but he was actually the ultimate realist. He understood that the world is shaped by those who see human nature for what it actually is, not what they wish it could be. The people who run the world study his playbook. The people who get run over ignore it. But let me pause right here and make one thing absolutely crystal clear. The 8 lessons you are about to learn are not instructions on how to become a toxic person. They are weapons of psychological self-defense. In a world full of manipulators, narcissists, and opportunists, naive kindness is your biggest liability. You must understand the dark arts of power so they can never be used against you. You are learning how to forge a sword so you never have to fight unarmed again. If you are ready to stop being played and start seeing the board clearly, drop this exact affirmation in the comments right now. I choose reality over illusion. Now, let us unlock the 8 ruthless lessons that will make you dangerously smart. Lesson number 1 is the armor of silence, or the art of strategic undersharing. We live in an era where everyone is addicted to broadcasting every single thought, emotion, and move they make. People believe that transparency equals authenticity. They think that by laying all their cards on the table, they will be rewarded with trust and connection. But in the real world, absolute transparency does not buy you respect. It buys you vulnerability. When you tell people everything, you give them the exact blueprint they need to dismantle you. You become predictable, and in the game of power, predictability is the ultimate weakness. Think about how the average person communicates. When someone asks them a question, they do not just answer it, they over-explain. They nervously fill the silence with justifications, apologies, and unnecessary details. If a boss asks them why a project is delayed, they launch into a desperate 5-minute monologue about their weekend, their stress levels, and their excuses. If a date asks them about their past, they spill their deepest traumas before the appetizers even arrive. They do this because silence makes them uncomfortable. They equate talking with control, but the dangerously smart individual knows the exact opposite is true. The person who speaks the least holds the most power in any room. Machiavelli understood this dynamic intimately. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few really know what you are. Let those words sink in for a moment. You do not owe the world your complete truth. You only owe them the version of you that serves your current objectives. When you deliberately withhold information, you force people to use their imagination, and human imagination is far more powerful than any words you could ever speak. If you are quiet, calm, and observant, people will automatically project their own insecurities and assumptions onto you. They will assume you know more than you do. They will assume you hold cards you have not played yet. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their own anxiety back at them. Let us look at a real-world scenario. Imagine you are in a high-stakes negotiation, whether it is for a salary increase, a business deal, or even a personal boundary with a difficult family member. The amateur makes their demand and immediately follows it up with a barrage of reasons why they deserve it. They talk, and with every word, they leak desperation. They are begging for validation. The master, however, states their terms clearly and concisely, and then they simply stop talking. They lean back. They hold eye contact. They let the silence stretch out. That silence is heavy. It is oppressive to the amateur. The other person will feel an overwhelming psychological pressure to fill that dead air. In their rush to break the tension, they will start negotiating against themselves. They will reveal their true limits. They will offer concessions you did not even have to ask for. All because you had the discipline to keep your mouth shut. You did not apply force. You applied empty space, and they fell right into it. This is not just about negotiations. It is about your everyday aura. When you practice strategic undersharing, you stop being a heavily read book and you become a puzzle. When colleagues ask about your weekend, You do not give them an itemized itinerary. You give them a polite, vague smile and say it was productive, then ask about theirs. You answer questions with questions. You do not complain about your struggles, and you do not brag about your victories. You let your results speak so loudly that your voice becomes unnecessary. By withholding the trivial details of your life, you suddenly make your words incredibly valuable. Think of your words like currency. If the government prints money recklessly, hyperinflation occurs, and every individual dollar becomes worthless. If you talk constantly, your words lose their weight. People stop listening. They tune you out because they know there is an endless supply of noise coming from you. But if you are historically quiet, if you only speak when it is absolutely necessary, the dynamic shifts. When you finally do open your mouth, the entire room stops to listen. They lean in because your words are scarce, and scarcity creates value. So how do you actually build this armor of silence? How do you rewire years of conditioning that taught you to nervously chatter? It starts with a very simple, mechanical habit. I call it the 3-second rule. Starting tomorrow, whenever someone asks you a question that carries any sort of weight, you are going to intentionally pause for 3 full seconds before you open your mouth. 1, 2, 3. In those 3 seconds, several things happen. First, you short-circuit your emotional reflex. You stop the nervous ramble before it can escape your throat. Second, you give yourself time to calculate exactly how much information is strictly necessary to share, and not a single word more. And third, you subtly establish dominance. By making the other person wait for your response, you communicate that you are not eager to please them. You are on your own internal clock. You dictate the pacing of the interaction. At first, those 3 seconds will feel like an eternity. Your heart might beat a little faster. Your brain will scream at you to fill the void. But as you practice it, you will begin to feel a profound sense of control. You will watch other people squirm, fidget, and reveal their hands while you sit there completely unbothered. You will realize that you do not need to defend yourself constantly. Remember, information is ammunition. Every personal detail, every unprovoked complaint, every unnecessary explanation you give to someone is a bullet you are handing them, trusting they will never load it into a gun and point it at you. The dangerously smart person simply refuses to hand over the ammunition. You become bulletproof not by fighting back, but by giving them absolutely nothing to shoot at. You remain an enigma, a shadow, a presence that cannot be categorized or easily manipulated. And in a world where everyone is desperately screaming for attention, the one who watches in silence is the one who truly rules. Once you have mastered the armor of silence, you will naturally begin to notice a shift in how people react to you. Because you are no longer desperately filling the void with your own insecurities, you will see other people's insecurities much more clearly. And the most common, most destructive insecurity of all is the desperate, exhausting need to be universally liked. This brings us to lesson number 2, the respect versus affection paradox. From childhood, we are conditioned with a fundamentally flawed equation. We are taught that if we are nice, accommodating, and agreeable, people will love us. And if people love us, they will treat us well. It sounds beautiful in a fairy tale, but in the brutal reality of human dynamics, it is a recipe for complete subjugation. The world does not reward absolute niceness. The world exploits it. If your primary goal in life is to be liked by everyone you meet, you are walking around with a giant target on your back. You are broadcasting to every manipulator, narcissist, and opportunist that you are willing to compromise your own boundaries just to keep the peace. Niccolo Machiavelli addressed this fatal flaw with what is arguably his most famous and most misunderstood piece of advice. He wrote that if you must choose between the two, it is much safer to be feared than loved, because love is held by a thread of obligation which, because men are wicked, is broken whenever it serves their own advantage. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. When modern people hear that quote, they usually recoil. They imagine a dictator, a tyrant, a toxic boss screaming at employees, or an abusive partner ruling through intimidation. But that is amateur behavior. That is not the kind of fear Machiavelli was talking about, and it is certainly not the kind of dark intelligence you are building. You are not trying to make people fear for their physical safety or their emotional well-being. You are trying to make them fear the consequences of crossing your boundaries. You are installing a healthy, unshakable dread of losing your respect, your time, or your presence. Think about the difference between affection and respect. Affection is incredibly cheap. People will feel affection for a dog that rolls over on command. They will feel affection for the coworker who always takes their shift without complaining, or the friend who always pays for dinner and never asks for anything in return. They claim to love that person because that person is convenient, but they do not respect them. The moment the nice person stops being convenient, the moment they finally try to stand up for themselves and say no, the affection vanishes instantly. It is replaced by anger, guilt-tripping, and entitlement, because the parasite is angry that the host has stopped feeding it. Now look at the dangerously smart individual. They do not care if you find them convenient. They are not trying to be your best friend. They operate with a polite, firm, and immovable set of standards. If you cross a line, they do not yell or throw a tantrum. They simply withdraw their energy, their favor, or their resources. They look you dead in the eye and say no, without offering a frantic, trembling apology. This creates a deeply rooted psychological respect. The people around them understand, on a primal level, that this is not someone who can be pushed around. This is the great paradox. The harder you try to be loved, the less respect you get. But when you completely abandon the need to be liked and focus entirely on demanding respect, a miraculous thing happens. People actually begin to value you more. Human beings are wired to assign higher value to things that are difficult to obtain. If your approval is given freely to everyone who demands it, your approval is completely worthless. If your approval must be earned by treating you with dignity, your approval becomes a prize. Let us look at how this plays out in the workplace. The amateur manager wants to be friends with their team. They let deadlines slide. They laugh off disrespectful comments. They do other people's work to avoid difficult conversations. They think they are building a positive culture, but what they are actually doing is breeding a culture of contempt. The high performers lose motivation because they see that mediocrity is tolerated, and the low performers take complete advantage. When a crisis inevitably hits, and the manager finally tries to assert authority, no one listens. They have trained their team to view them as weak. The dangerously smart leader takes the exact opposite approach. They are perfectly comfortable being the villain in someone else's temporary narrative, so long as the standard is maintained. They deliver constructive criticism without softening it with 1,000 hollow compliments. They hold people accountable. They do not lose a single second of sleep worrying if their employees are gossiping about them at the water cooler. And paradoxically, when the dust settles, this is the leader the team will actually follow into the trenches. They might not invite this leader out for drinks every weekend, but they trust them. They know exactly where the lines are drawn. That is the modern translation of being feared. It is the fear of falling short of the standard you have set. In your personal relationships, this principle is the ultimate filter for toxic people. Manipulators test your boundaries like a thief checking for unlocked doors in the middle of the night. They will make a subtly insulting joke, ask for an unreasonable favor, or show up an hour late, just to see how you react. The amateur smiles, swallows their frustration, and says it is okay, no worries. They prioritize the other person's comfort over their own dignity. They chose to be loved rather than respected, and by doing so, they have invited the thief inside. If you want to apply dark intelligence, you must rip that phrase out of your vocabulary. You must become completely comfortable with the heavy, awkward tension that follows a boundary being enforced. If someone disrespects you, you look at them coldly and say that you do not appreciate being spoken to like that. If someone is habitually late, you leave without them. You do not argue. You do not explain your feelings. You simply deliver the consequence. They might call you difficult. They might call you cold. Let them. Their temporary anger is entirely irrelevant. What matters is that they have learned, through the pain of consequence, that you are not a playground. You are a fortress. To master this lesson, you must undergo a fundamental mindset shift. You have to mourn the death of the overly accommodating version of yourself. You must accept that you cannot control other people's narratives about you. Somewhere right now, someone is telling a story where you are the bad guy, simply because you stopped letting them use you. Let them tell it. Let them be angry. Your objective in this life is not to win a popularity contest among people who only value you for what you can give them. Your objective is to build a life where your peace, your time, and your energy are untouchable. By letting go of the desperate, cloying need for affection, you take back your power. You become a force of nature. And while a force of nature might not always be universally loved, it is absolutely, undeniably respected. Once you establish yourself as a force of nature that commands respect rather than begs for affection, your vision becomes violently clear. Stripped of emotional attachments and the desperate need to be liked, you stop looking at the world through the rose-tinted glasses of how people should behave. Instead, you begin to observe the cold, mechanical reality of how they actually behave. And when you strip away the polite smiles, the corporate jargon, and the societal pleasantries, you uncover a singular, driving force behind almost every human action. This brings us to lesson number 3, the illusion of mercy, and the absolute power of appealing to self-interest. When the average person finds themselves in a position of need, whether they are asking for a promotion, trying to close a deal, or seeking help from a friend, they default to a strategy of mercy. They appeal to the other person's sense of fairness. They bring up past loyalty. They say things like, "I really need this favor," or "I have worked so hard for this company," or "Remember that time I helped you out last year?" They lay their vulnerability on the table and pray that the other person's conscience will compel them to act. They are relying on gratitude and altruism. This is a fatal, amateur miscalculation. Niccolo Machiavelli understood the devastating flaw in this approach. He observed that men are inherently self-interested, fickle, and opportunistic. If you rely on their gratitude, you are building your entire strategy on a foundation of sand. Machiavelli warned that when you remind someone of a past favor, you do not inspire loyalty, you inspire resentment. Why? Because gratitude is a debt, and human beings despise feeling indebted. When you bring up what you have done for them in the past, their ego instantly rebels. They will subconsciously look for reasons to devalue your past help, just so they can justify turning their back on you in the present. They will convince themselves that you didn't help them that much, or that they earned it anyway. Relying on mercy is practically begging to be betrayed. The dangerously smart individual completely discards the concept of mercy. They never ask for a favor based on what they deserve, what they have done in the past, or how much they are currently suffering. Instead, they engineer the situation so that giving them what they want is the most logical, profitable, and selfish choice the other person can possibly make. They do not appeal to the heart. They appeal to the appetite. They appeal strictly to self-interest. Think about the psychology behind this shift. People do not want to help you. It sounds cynical, but it is the truth. People want to help themselves. But if you can cleverly align your needs with their desires, they will move mountains for you, completely under the illusion that they are acting independently. When you master this, you are no longer asking for a favor. You are offering a lucrative partnership. You are removing all the friction from the transaction. Let us look at a practical, everyday example. Imagine you are pitching a new project to your boss that requires a significant budget. The amateur walks into that office and makes it entirely about themselves. They talk about their vision, how passionate they are about the project, and how much it would mean for their career development. The boss nods, smiles politely, and rejects the proposal, because the boss does not care about your career development. The boss cares about their own metrics, their own stress levels, and their own reputation with the executives above them. Now, look at the Machiavellian approach. The dangerously smart employee walks into that same office and does not say a single word about their own passions or needs. Before they even open their mouth, they have ruthlessly analyzed the boss's current pain points. What is the boss afraid of losing? What bonus are they trying to hit? How can this project make the boss look like a genius to the board of directors? They frame the pitch entirely around those desires. They say, if we allocate this budget, it will cut your department's overhead by 15% this quarter, directly solving the problem the CEO complained about last week. The boss does not hear a request for money. The boss hears a strategy for their own survival and promotion. The request is granted instantly, not out of kindness, but out of pure, unfiltered self-interest. To utilize this dark intelligence, you must become a master observer of human motivation. Every time you are about to ask for something, you must bite your tongue and ask yourself one golden, non-negotiable question. What is in it for them? If you cannot answer that question clearly and compellingly, you are not ready to open your mouth. You must never assume that people will do the right thing simply because it is the right thing. You must figure out what they value. Do they crave public recognition? Do they desperately want to avoid extra work? Are they driven by financial greed, or are they motivated by a fear of looking incompetent? Once you identify their specific hunger, you serve your request on a platter that perfectly satisfies that hunger. If you are dealing with a narcissist, you frame your request as something that will amplify their status and make them look powerful. If you are dealing with a lazy person, you frame your request as a system that will permanently reduce their daily workload. You act as a mirror, reflecting their own selfish desires back at them, completely masking your own intentions in the process. This requires a profound level of emotional detachment, which ties directly back to everything you have learned so far. You have to swallow your pride. Your ego will want to scream, "I deserve this. They owe me." But your ego is your enemy in the game of power. Your ego wants validation. Your dark intelligence wants results. By completely removing your own emotional need for fairness from the equation, you become an invisible architect. You arrange the pieces on the chessboard so that the other person willingly walks exactly where you want them to go, entirely convinced it was their own idea. Many people shrink away from this concept because it feels manipulative. They want to believe in a world where people help each other simply out of the goodness of their hearts. And while spontaneous acts of kindness do exist, they are entirely too fragile to build a life strategy upon. Appealing to self-interest is not about being evil or malicious. It is about understanding the raw mechanics of gravity. You do not get mad at gravity for pulling things to the ground. You build airplanes that use aerodynamic principles to overcome it. By accepting that people are driven by self-interest, you stop being a victim of their selfishness. You stop getting disappointed when people let you down, because you realize you gave them the wrong incentive. You take complete ownership of the interaction. You are no longer hoping for a handout. You are trading value for value in a marketplace of human behavior. Starting today, erase the word favor from your vocabulary. Erase the expectation of mercy. The next time you need someone to act in your favor, take a step back. Analyze their fears, their ambitions, and their immediate needs. Weave your request into the fabric of their desires. Show them how giving you exactly what you want is the greatest thing they could possibly do for themselves. When you stop appealing to the angels of their better nature and start speaking directly to their self-interest, you will watch the heaviest doors effortlessly swing open for you. Once you recognize that everyone is driven by raw self-interest, you face a new and complex obstacle. You might know exactly what the person across from you wants, but if you deliver your strategy using the wrong language, your message will be violently rejected. This brings us to lesson number 4, the adaptive mask, or the absolute necessity of cultivating a fluid persona. To manipulate your environment, you must first be able to seamlessly blend into it. You cannot force the world to adapt to you. You must become the shape of the container you are poured into. We are currently infected by a modern, romanticized disease called authenticity. Pop psychology and social media constantly preach that you should just be yourself, live your truth, and never alter your personality for anyone. People wear their rigid, unchanging personalities like a badge of honor. They proudly declare that this is just who they are, and everyone else can take it or leave it. But in the theater of power, take it or leave it is the battle cry of the incredibly weak. When you insist on being the exact same person in every single room you enter, you are not being authentic. You are being completely inflexible. You are demanding that the entire world adjust its frequency to accommodate you. And the cold reality is that the world simply does not care enough about you to do that. Rigidity makes you a monolith. It makes you predictable, easy to read, and remarkably easy to destroy. Niccolo Machiavelli viewed behavioral rigidity as a death sentence for anyone seeking influence. He observed that a ruler who relies on a single mode of behavior will inevitably fall when the times and circumstances change. He advised that one must possess a mind ready to turn itself according to the way the winds of fortune dictate. He explicitly noted that while it is essential to appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, and religious, your mind must be so trained that, when it is necessary not to be so, you know how to change to the exact opposite. A dangerously smart individual understands that their personality is not a permanent statue carved from heavy marble. It is a wardrobe. It is a highly specialized toolkit. You do not wear a heavy winter coat to the beach, and you do not wear a swimsuit into a blizzard. Why, then, would you use the exact same emotional and conversational toolkit with a cutthroat corporate executive that you use with a fragile friend or a hostile competitor. The amateur hears this concept and immediately recoils in moral outrage. They scream that this is fake, two-faced, and deceptive. This is a fundamental, fatal misunderstanding of what the adaptive mask actually is. Having a fluid persona does not mean abandoning your core values, compromising your morals, or lying about your fundamental beliefs. The product inside the box remains entirely unchanged. What you are actively changing is the packaging. You are acting as a master translator. If you are trying to sell a brilliant idea to a highly analytical, data-driven cynic, you strip away all the emotion. You check your passion at the door. You speak to them in cold, hard metrics, spreadsheets, and historical precedent. You match their clinical, calculated energy. But if you walk into the very next room and have to sell that exact same idea to a highly emotional, visionary creative, you leave the spreadsheets behind. You speak in grand narratives, deep feelings, and explosive potential. You do not change your ultimate goal. You change the vocabulary, the tone, and the energy you use to achieve it. You speak the language of the native, rather than screaming at them in a foreign tongue and getting angry when they do not understand you. This goes far beyond just business. It is the ultimate hack for human psychology. People fundamentally trust what is familiar to them. Human beings are deeply tribal, narcissistic creatures. We are biologically wired to feel comfortable around people who sound like us, move like us, and think like us. When you wear the adaptive mask, you are essentially holding up a psychological mirror to the person in front of you. If they speak slowly and deliberately, you consciously slow down your own cadence. If they are animated and loud, you bring a controlled burst of energy to the table. When you perfectly match their frequency, their subconscious defenses instantly drop. They feel a sudden, unexplainable kinship with you. They will walk away from the conversation thinking that you just get it. They do not realize that you purposefully orchestrated that feeling of deep connection by temporarily adopting their psychological posture. The reason most people fail miserably at this is pure, unadulterated ego. Their ego demands that they impose their own natural personality on every room they enter. If they are a naturally loud, dominant person, they want to overpower the quiet room to prove how strong they are. If they are a quiet person, they refuse to speak up in a loud room, telling themselves they are maintaining their peace. But the dangerously smart person has completely divorced their ego from their social presentation. They do not need to prove who they are to anyone. They are perfectly content to shrink themselves, to play the fool, to act incredibly naive, or to feign total ignorance if it serves their ultimate objective. They understand that true power lies in versatility, not visibility. If playing the quiet, submissive underling gets you the critical intelligence you need, you play that role flawlessly. If playing the dominant, uncompromising authority figure forces the negotiation to close, you flip the switch and become a tyrant in the blink of an eye. You must become like water. Water has no inherent shape of its own. When you pour it into a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. It flows, it bends, and it adapts entirely to whatever container holds it. Yet, despite its infinite flexibility, water retains the terrifying power to carve through solid rock over time. It never loses its true, destructive essence, but it never fights the shape of its environment unnecessarily. By developing a fluid persona, you flow around resistance instead of crashing violently into it. You glide through different social hierarchies, hostile corporate cultures, and unpredictable environments with terrifying ease, entirely undetectable because you perfectly match the background. To practice the adaptive mask, you must begin to view every social interaction as an active study in human behavior rather than a stage for your own ego. Before you engage, you must observe. Take the temperature of the room. Identify the specific communication style of your target. Are they a predator who only respects absolute strength? Are they a victim who is desperately seeking a savior? Are they an intellectual who needs to feel intellectually superior to you? Figure out the role they need you to play. Choose your mask carefully, slip it on, and speak their language without a trace of an accent. Do not get attached to any single, rigid version of yourself. You are not a fixed character in a movie. You are the actor, the director, and the scriptwriter all at once. By refusing to be bound by the heavy illusion of a single, authentic self, you become a ghost in the machine, capable of moving anywhere and influencing anyone, completely unimpeded by the rules that trap everyone else. Mastering the fluid persona requires an absolutely terrifying level of internal discipline. If you are a slave to your own feelings, your mask will inevitably slip the second you are provoked. You cannot be water if your blood is boiling. This brings us to the ultimate pairing of dark intelligence, Lesson 5, emotional detachment, and Lesson 6, outcome obsession. These two principles are so intimately entangled that one cannot truly exist without the other. Together, they form the psychological armor that makes you virtually invincible to manipulation. Let us begin with the heavy, unyielding shield of emotional detachment. Society romanticizes deep emotional investment. We are told that caring intensely about everything is a virtue. We are conditioned to pour our entire souls into our jobs, our arguments, and our relationships. We are taught to wear our hearts on our sleeves. But in the ruthless mechanics of human interaction, intense emotional attachment is the exact mechanism by which you are controlled. Think of your desires, your fears, and your desperate hopes as a series of heavy iron chains wrapped around your neck. Whoever holds the thing you want, whether it is a promotion, a relationship, or even just social validation, holds the other end of that chain. If you desperately need a job to validate your self-worth, your boss can yank that chain to make you work 80 hours a week for terrible pay. If you desperately need someone to love you, that person can yank the chain to make you tolerate endless disrespect. The amateur is covered in these chains, constantly being pulled in 100 different directions by their own uncontrolled desires. Niccolo Machiavelli observed that men are driven primarily by their fears and their appetites. He understood that whoever controls what you fear losing controls you. The dangerously smart individual recognizes this vulnerability and systematically cuts the chains. They practice the dark art of emotional detachment. Now, you must not confuse detachment with apathy. Apathy is the lazy, nihilistic surrender of someone who has given up on life. Detachment is something entirely different. Detachment is the supreme, calculated power of looking at something you want and saying, "I prefer to have this, but I absolutely do not need it to survive." When you strip away your desperation, the power dynamic in any room instantly flips in your favor. Imagine a high-stakes negotiation. Two people sit across from each other. Person A has already spent the money in their head. They are emotionally attached to the victory, desperate for the deal to close, and terrified of walking away empty-handed. Person B wants the deal, but they have utterly detached their ego from the outcome. They know their life will remain completely fine if the deal falls apart. Who holds the power? Person B dictates every single term, because the person who is most willing to walk away from the table always owns the table. Their detachment makes them immune to pressure, immune to bluffs, and immune to threats. This brings us directly to the sword of our psychological armory, outcome obsession. Once you sever the emotional chains holding you hostage, a profound transformation occurs. Your ego dissolves. And the death of the ego is the birthplace of absolute outcome obsession. The vast majority of people walking this earth are completely obsessed with their own egos. They do not actually want to solve problems. They want to feel important. They want to be validated. They desperately want to win the argument. Have you ever watched two amateurs argue in a boardroom or a living room? It is a pathetic display of bruised egos. They raise their voices, they interrupt each other, they dig up past mistakes, and they scorch the earth around them just to prove they are intellectually superior. They might technically win the argument and secure the last word, but in the process, they destroy the relationship, sabotage the contract, and ruin their own reputation. They won the battle of pride, but they lost the entire war. The dangerously smart individual views pride as a toxic, worthless asset. Pride pays no bills, pride builds no empires, and pride offers no protection. Instead of asking, "How can I prove I am right?" they ask one ruthless, defining question. What is the exact outcome I want, and what is the fastest way to get it? When you become outcome obsessed, you stop playing the game of vanity and start playing the game of reality. You measure every single word you speak and every action you take against a cold, binary metric. Does this move me closer to my objective, or does it push me further away? If it moves you closer, you execute it flawlessly. If it pushes you away, you discard it, no matter how much your ego desperately wants to engage. This means you become perfectly willing to look foolish, to be misunderstood, and to let other people think they have outsmarted you. Imagine you are dealing with an arrogant, hostile competitor who insults your intelligence to provoke a reaction. The amateur gets red in the face, abandons their strategy, and defends their honor. The master of dark intelligence absorbs the insult like a sponge absorbing water. They do not flinch. They smile politely, swallow their pride, and stroke the aggressor's ego, deliberately inflating the competitor's overconfidence. They let the competitor win the trivial shouting match, because the master is quietly maneuvering the pieces to take the actual prize. Machiavelli built his entire philosophy on this exact premise. The concept that the end justifies the means has been twisted by history to imply evil, sociopathic behavior. But at its core, it is the ultimate expression of outcome obsession. It means keeping your eyes locked so intensely on the final destination that you do not care if the path requires you to walk through the mud, to flatter a fool, or to temporarily surrender your own vanity. When you fuse emotional detachment with outcome obsession, you become a ghost in the machine. You become untouchable. Because you are detached, your enemies have nothing to threaten you with. Because your ego is dead, their insults pass right through you without leaving a scratch. You stop wasting your precious, finite energy on petty dramas and start channeling all of it into calculated execution. Think about the profound freedom in this mindset. You no longer have to defend your reputation to people whose opinions do not matter. You no longer have to win every trivial debate. You can sit in silence while someone lies to your face, simply noting the lie as valuable data, rather than emotionally exploding and calling them out. You let them have the last word. You let them take the superficial credit. You let them strut around like a peacock. You willingly trade all of that useless, shiny vanity for the one thing that actually governs the world. Tangible, undeniable results. While the rest of the world is desperately fighting to look powerful, you are quietly, systematically gathering actual power. Once you have successfully purged your ego and rewired your mind to focus exclusively on outcomes, you arrive at the most controversial threshold of dark intelligence. This is the point where the polite, comfortable illusions of civilized society completely shatter. You must now learn how to wield the power you have gathered, and more importantly, how to protect it from those who want to take it from you. This brings us to the final two pillars of your psychological armory. Lesson 7, Fluid Ethics, and Lesson 8, Radical Self-Reliance. Together, these two principles form the ultimate fail-safe. They are the emergency protocols that guarantee your survival when the rules of the game suddenly change and the people around you show their true faces. Let us confront the heavy, uncomfortable reality of Lesson 7, Fluid Ethics, or Ambiguous Morality. From the moment we are old enough to understand language, we are force-fed a rigidly binary moral code. We are taught that the world is neatly divided into good and evil, right and wrong, black and white. We are told that good people always play fair, good people never lie, and good people always turn the other cheek. But what happens when the good person, playing by these rigid, honorable rules, encounters a predator who operates with absolutely no rules at all? The good person gets slaughtered, and worse, everything the good person was supposed to protect, their family, their team, their livelihood, gets destroyed along with them. This is the fatal flaw of rigid morality. It makes you a predictable, defenseless target in a world that is fundamentally gray. Niccolo Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear about this dynamic. He wrote that a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to ruin among so many who are not good. Therefore, it is necessary for a leader to learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge, or not use it, according to the necessity of the case. He understood that pure moral clarity is a luxury. It is a luxury that you can only afford when you are sitting safely on the sidelines. But the moment you step into the arena, the moment you take responsibility for real outcomes and real people, you cannot afford to be paralyzed by a rigid rulebook. You must become pragmatically lethal. This concept terrifies amateurs because they confuse fluid ethics with sociopathy. They think this is a license to become a monster, to cheat, to steal, and to betray people just to get ahead. That is not dark intelligence. That is reckless criminality, and it always leads to destruction. Fluid ethics is something entirely different. It is about expanding your capacity for ruthlessness and then keeping it tightly sheathed until it is absolutely required. Think of the difference between being harmless and being peaceful. A harmless person is incapable of violence, manipulation, or cruelty. They do not have the teeth for it. Therefore, their peacefulness is not a choice. It is a forced submission. A dangerously smart person has massive, terrifying teeth. They are fully capable of playing dirty, lying to an enemy, and utterly destroying a threat. But they actively choose to be kind, loyal, and generous. Their peace is a choice, and because it is a choice, it commands absolute respect. You must give yourself permission to operate in the gray when the situation demands it. Imagine you discover a toxic colleague is actively sabotaging your career, spreading lies, and trying to steal your position. The rigidly moral person tries to take the high road. They try to have a polite conversation. They hope the truth will naturally prevail, and they get fired. The dangerously smart person recognizes that the rules of peacetime no longer apply. They adapt their ethics to the threat level. They will systematically gather dirt on that colleague, lay a flawless trap, and orchestrate their total removal from the company without a shred of guilt. To the outside observer, this looks cold and ruthless, but to the practitioner of dark intelligence, destroying a predator to protect your own survival is the highest form of ethics. You do not fight fair against someone who brings poison to a fistfight. But if ethics are fluid, and if human beings are inherently self-interested and capable of betrayal, how do you navigate the world? How do you form relationships? How do you ever sleep at night? You sleep peacefully by mastering the final pillar. Lesson 8. Radical self-reliance. Because you now see human nature for what it truly is, you understand that trust, in the traditional, romanticized sense, is a massive vulnerability. Most people trust blindly because they are intellectually and emotionally lazy. They want to outsource their security. They want to hand the heavy responsibility of their happiness, their financial stability, and their peace of mind over to someone else. They build their entire empire on pillars held up by their spouse, their boss, or their business partner. Machiavelli explicitly warned against this outsourcing of power. He stated that a wise prince should build on his own foundation, not on that of others. When you build your life on the backs of other people, you are not building an empire, you are building a house of cards. When one of those people inevitably changes their mind, gets selfish, or walks away, the entire structure collapses. The amateur falls to their knees, cries betrayal, and plays the victim. They blame the other person for ruining their life. But the dangerously smart individual knows the brutal truth. If your life completely falls apart because one person decided to leave, the failure is entirely yours. You gave them too much leverage. You handed them the keys to a kingdom they did not build. Radical self-reliance is the active, continuous assumption that anyone, under the right amount of pressure or temptation, could turn on you. It is the understanding that loyalty is not a permanent tattoo. It is a daily lease that must be renewed. Adopting this mindset does not make you a bitter, paranoid cynic hiding in a basement, completely isolated from society. On the contrary, it makes you incredibly free, and it actually makes you a far better partner and leader. You still love your spouse. You still collaborate deeply with your team. You still enjoy the company of your friends and allies. But you never, ever give them the ability to destroy you. You compartmentalize your vulnerabilities. In practice, this means you maintain independent streams of leverage. You never let your entire financial survival depend entirely on one boss or one client. You never let your entire emotional stability depend entirely on one relationship. You keep your own counsel, you maintain your own private resources, and you constantly hone your individual skills so that you are always valuable in the marketplace, regardless of who is standing next to you. You build a life that is so structurally sound, so deeply anchored in your own independent capabilities, that if your closest ally suddenly became your worst enemy tomorrow morning, it would be a severe inconvenience, but it would never be an apocalypse. Imagine the profound, absolute peace of mind that comes with this level of self-reliance. Most people walk through their lives in quiet terror. They are terrified of being abandoned, terrified of being fired, terrified of being betrayed. Their fear makes them clingy, desperate, and incredibly easy to manipulate. But you have systematically eradicated that fear. You do not fear betrayal because you have already factored it into your equations. You have emergency protocols mentally written for scenarios most people are too terrified to even imagine. You walk through the world with a light step, not because you naively trust everyone you meet, but because you absolutely, unconditionally trust yourself to handle it when they inevitably fail you. This is the zenith of dark intelligence. You have stripped away all the illusions, you have accepted the ruthless reality of the game, and you have made yourself entirely unbreakable. When you finally reach this state, when you are entirely unbreakable, the world looks completely different. You have stepped out of the comfortable, blinding illusions of your past and into the cold, sharp light of reality. You now possess the complete architecture of dark intelligence. You understand the armor of silence, the paradox of respect, the absolute supremacy of self-interest, and the necessity of the fluid mask. You have learned to sever your emotional chains, become violently obsessed with outcomes, adapt your ethics to the threat level, and build an empire of radical self-reliance. But possessing this knowledge brings a heavy, inescapable burden. This brings us back to the warning I gave you at the very beginning of our journey. You did not learn these ruthless mechanics to become the villain in someone else's story. You learned them so that no villain can ever write your story for you. The world is full of predators who use these exact principles to manipulate, extract, and destroy. By mastering their playbook, you strip them of their power. True dark intelligence is not about abusing the innocent. It is about recognizing manipulation the moment it enters the room and neutralizing it before it can draw blood. You have learned how to forge a lethal sword, but the ultimate display of supreme power is having the absolute discipline to keep that sword in its sheath until you are forced to protect yourself or the people you care about. Knowledge without brutal, consistent execution is just intellectual entertainment. To become dangerously smart, you must build the muscle memory in the real world. So, I am issuing you a 7-day challenge. Do not try to master all 8 of these lessons at once. Your ego will panic, you will become overwhelmed, and you will revert to your old habits. Instead, pick just one. If you naturally overshare, practice the armor of silence and implement the 3-second rule. If you are a chronic people pleaser, practice the respect paradox, and finally say no to someone this week. For the next 7 days, apply that single trait ruthlessly to your daily interactions. Watch how the power dynamics around you instantly shift. Watch how people look at you differently, with a sudden, cautious respect, when they realize you are no longer playing by their rules. If this video shattered the illusions holding you back, and if you are ready to master the dark, unspoken realities of human psychology, hit the subscribe button right now. Do not just watch and forget. Join a community of realists who refuse to be manipulated and who choose to see the world exactly as it is. Before you leave, I want you to drop a comment below. Tell me, which of these 8 lessons do you struggle with the most? And which one are you officially choosing for your 7-day challenge? Put it in writing. Make the commitment to yourself. Until next time, stay detached, stay dangerous, and above all, stay in control.